Might have been Zoll, the old rubberized one.
I know what you mean. Yeah, I can't remember. It wasn't that one we had, but yeah, it was a pretty basic model. But it worked if we needed it, which luckily we didn't.
Yeah, good stuff. So what did you take in terms of drugs?
I basically went through what we carried pre-hospital. I took out all the paediatric drugs because there was no one expected in my party to be a child, and we weren't really going to see the locals on this trip, being inside the volcano. And then I had a chat with a few GPs and got a few additions, but even the basics like rehydration salts, I had boxes of those, and I'm expecting coughs, colds, headaches. So I massively ramped up the paracetamol. And then thinking outside the box for things like altitude sickness, and I can't remember the exact list, but I took quite a lot on that first trip. The advantage being I knew that we did have porters to carry it, and it wasn't all on me in one rucksack. So I probably took everything by the kitchen sink, I think.
Brilliant. Definitely makes a difference if you've got some means to carry it and it's not all on your own back.
Hugely, yeah.
As a UK paramedic, you generally operate within JR Calc. Slightly different if you're an offshore medic. You've got reach back, and as a Navy medic or as an offshore medic, you're trained in primary care. But as a UK frontline ambulance tech, unless you're in a specialist role, you probably don't do a lot of primary care. What did you do in terms of protocols or medical direction for the primary care side?
That was my big worry for the trip, really, trying to obviously stay within my scope of practice, but knowing that potentially there was a big chance that I'd be expected to do other things. I had a lot of conversation with doctors and chased as much as I could, but on that first trip, if truth be told, it was still a grey area. I never received a definitive answer from anyone as to what I could and couldn't do outside of JR Calc, with it being another country and things, what rules he came under. But yeah, I got given a lot of advice, but was quite blind. And in the end, I just went back to, the thought of, I'll do my best. And I've on any job, I have two rules that I kind of work by. Worst case, would I be happy stood up in, say, a coroner's court saying, yes, that's what I did, and realistically, it's probably what I'd do again. And B, would I sleep at night knowing that I did the best for my patient? And they were kind of the rules I decided to go by. And luckily, didn't have to kind of really rely on them all that too much.
Yeah, no, it's good common sense stuff. And I think most people on their first trip do exactly the same. It's not until, I think you're going to talk about this, but it's not until you come back from your first trip and reflect on it that you see how you can improve on it or what the deficiencies were. But we'll come on to that in a second. Did you have a medical emergency response plan in place? Was that mentioned in the call sheet?
It wasn't. The first few days of this first trip, the expedition leader and I, the safety team, which was three of us on this first trip, flew out a week early. That was for a few days to recce all the local hospitals and see what kind of in-country facilities we had. But the primary goal of that was to get the ropes and the essentially camp set up in the volcano. And we found, we learned quite a lot on that. But there was a local hospital that couldn't do enough for us. They were even happy to park an ambulance at the bottom of the volcano for the entire duration we were there, which we declined. I think we had more. We certainly had as much kit as they had at the hospital, I think, by the surgery facilities. And also it meant that it wouldn't be available for the local population, which we didn't want to put that kind of pressure on them. But unfortunately, the UN hospital weren't willing to play ball with us because we didn't have a letter that allowed us access, which was a big learning point because we were hoping that we'd be able to use that, and no one was aware until we actually went and spoke with them, at which point it was far too late to get that in place.
Interesting. Makes you wonder if the wheel had come off, if they would have let you in anyway.
There was a discussion on that, but they seemed pretty adamant. The managers that we spoke to, essentially, for no ticket to come in, you ain't coming in.
Well, that's great. It's great that you had time to do that reconnaissance. Time spent in reconnaissance is seldom wasted because you've just proved the concept, and there's no point wasting time going there if you're going to get turned away at the door.
No, and also it altered if we had needed it, our transport options, because the main helicopter we would have been using was through the UN, but there was no helipad on the other hospital, so they basically meant a land transport as opposed to air, which obviously massive extension of duration that you're looking after your patient then.
Yeah, that's interesting. We talk about wilderness medicine, but when the wheel comes off and the clouds close in or the floods close the roads, it's all of a sudden it's prolonged field care. Very, very different.
Yeah, and especially coming from the pre-hospital background in the UK, I mean, even if you're in a rural area out here, I think my longest transport has been 40 minutes. I mean, for us, 40 minutes, you weren't even at the first level in the crater.
Even in Iraq, if we had an incident on the oil rig, providing there was nothing major going on the routes, you could be back in the city hospital within 2 hours.
Yeah, I mean, for us, if anyone got injured in the crater, it'd have been rubs to get them out, which the route wasn't ideal for, let's say. It was a pretty treacherous route, even with a fully able-bodied person. And then you've got to consider you've got to get them down the other side. There was a helipad there. There was a shelf of rocks which they potentially could have landed on, but realistically, it probably would have been stretchers and a lot of carrying and effort.
Yeah, it normally is. You talk about emergency care and prolonged field care. Did you take controlled drugs with you? Morphine, diazepam?
I didn't take morphine because of the legislation and things like that. We did manage to source from the hospital some diazepam and drugs out there, which we gave back once we'd finished. But my main kind of pain relief that I'd gone for was Penthrox for travelling.
Yeah.
Nice, lightweight. There's no real vials to break or anything. It's quite well sealed as a unit. And effective.
Oh, great considerations. I mean, they're the kind of things that can get you held up at customs or even arrested. So it's well worth it if you can plan ahead, and if you can source it locally, even better, providing you can trust in the source and it's not going to be fake.
Yeah, that was a concern, which is why we kind of got other options on the table. But speaking of customs, we made a huge mistake. We managed to get an oxygen cylinder out there with all the concern for the gases and things like that. Absolutely fine getting it out, but trying to get a CD oxygen or 2 CD cylinders back through random customs was emotional, let's say.
Yeah, I can well imagine being there. Yeah, these are all the things. If you got the luxury of time and you can make all the connections and visit these officers and speak to the authorities, get the relevant paperwork in place, generally anything's possible. But equally, anything can go wrong, and it just takes a change of personality in the office, and they don't recognise you or don't accept the paperwork, and all of a sudden the whole plan falls apart. So yeah, if you can source it locally and it's from a trusted source and not counterfeit, all the better.
Yeah, I mean, that was the situation we were in. We had all the paperwork and everything. It had been authorised by the airline before we went. But yeah, just the local security were having none of it. And I think in the end, the airline had to get a rep to the airport who personally asked the pilot, and he had no worries with it.
Good stuff, yeah. Going back to the people, did you have a chance to have a chat with the group or do a pre-trip questionnaire to look at any pre-existing conditions or needs prior to going?
Not really. I did request it, and as I was travelling to the airport, I got a spreadsheet with some information on it, but it wasn't for everyone. So the first time I met the scientific and film crew was after we'd been out as safety crew for a week, and they were already up the volcano at that point. They were at the summit.
Yeah, I mean, it's a nice to have, isn't it? It's a bit of a luxury to have an interview with people and talk about their pre-existing conditions and their ongoing issues, concerns, what medication is going to take. And a lot of the time people don't want to divulge that.
Yeah, and obviously in the environment, that is a real concern. If you can get that in advance, you expect people to carry their own meds, but you just want to get, your head around it. Is it going to make you bring some more medicine to specialise for them, or maybe a bit of extra kit, or be more aware? Yeah,
and experienced expeditioners probably do, but the average person or the average client on a trek, gone up a mountain, probably doesn't think that far ahead and may be accustomed to managing their own conditions back home. But on the side of a mountain or in the jungle, when their routine's thrown out or they're out of their comfort zone or more fatigued than normal, they're probably not thinking about planning ahead or taking the right meds or taking them at the right time. And then it becomes our problem.
Yeah, and you've also got the interactions. Like we're in Africa, so we were on anti-malarials. So you got to think, are there going to be anything going on there? Because they're generally pretty nasty drugs in and of themselves with a fair few side effects.
Yeah, and it's getting the right anti-malarials as well, isn't it? Making sure that. So prior to deploying, I know this is dragging on a bit, but I think 99% of what we do is planning and preparation as opposed to responding to emergencies. What were your expectations prior to deploying in terms of your responsibility, any top cover, medical direction, or any local support? Did you have any expectation of a support network prior to leaving?
Not a massive amount, to be honest. I had it on good authority that we as sat phones would be able to contact doctors if needs be. But even then, just playing it cautious, I'd contacted a few of my own people, if you like, and got them on side that if it all went wrong, could I ring them for advice and a bit of authorization if needed be. But yeah, there wasn't a massive amount, to be honest. I knew I was going to be the medic. I knew I was going to be expected to work on ropes, and I was going to be a bit of a camp manager, dog's body as well. But it was all a new experience. I just had the lucky that previously I had done, a bit of conservation expedition when I was in Honduras when I was in school. So I kind of knew the realities of, long days trekking and living in hammocks and tents and things.
Brilliant. That's half the battle, isn't it? Being self-sufficient, being able to look after yourself, being fit enough, comfortable enough to operate in that environment so you don't become a drain on the resources, or you can focus and critically think.
Yeah, and again, like you mentioned previously, you as the medic, there's a bit more of that pressure as well. You it's not set in stone, but in the back of your mind, you can't be the one that goes down.
Yeah, exactly. Nobody's coming for you if you do.
Yeah.
Okay, so we talked a little bit about the preparation. What was the exped like? What was the trip like overall in general?
It was an excellent trip, if I'm being honest. We got out there, we did our recce for all the hospitals, so we did put a basic plan in once we were out there, which we relayed back to the office because they were keeping tabs on us. The first week we did all the ropes, so we got all the ropes set up we basically got a base camp set up at the summit, which again was something that I knew it was at altitude, but I didn't expect quite how cold it'd be while we're at the equator, because there was a constant cutting wind. But yet when he dropped into the crater, you had the heat of the lava, so it was the conditions were a little bit harsher. But luckily, I'd taken a few spare kits of clothing, and we all kind of got on with that. And then when the film crew scientists came out, it all got ramped up. Then really, they've got their filming schedules, a lot more people to look after. And I had been warned about it in advance that when people say you got to look after the basics, we're talking about your cameraman might be absolutely focused on his shot, and they will, without thinking or even realizing, go hours without even taking a sip of water, and you think you're in, essentially really harsh environment. You're breathing sulfuric acid, you're at the equator, it's hot, and you just got to go around to remind them, drink water, move, stretch.
Yeah, prevention's better than cure, isn't it? And they're so focused, so tunnel visioned,
stubborn.
Yeah, without a doubt.
Because people don't realise they literally do sunrise to sunset, and the cameraman is filming or changing lenses or batteries. They just do not stop. They don't look where they're kneeling. They just concentrate on the view through the viewfinder. And yourself, you've really got to watch them because, like you say, they don't drink, they don't eat. They're probably stripped naked because they're making the body heat's making the lens steam up and it's affecting their view. And it's just like, I don't know how they do it, to be honest.
No, I mean, it is something else. It's pure dedication. And I think a lot of people don't appreciate quite what goes into even some what seem simple shots sometimes. I mean, on my second trip, we had one of the cameramen, we weren't up the volcano at this point, we were on the ground around Goma. So we're kind of equatorial sun. We'd been out since early hours and it was past midday, absolutely no shade. And I realised that he'd literally not moved. He had to, and he's still focused on his shot. And I'm trying to explain to him that, he feels okay now, but it's at this point he decides how well he's going to be for the rest of the shoot. Is he he'll feel it in the evening. And then you kind of got to get them on side and think what their goals are and suggest, if you just have a 10-minute break now for shade and water,